Hello, my name is Robert Cochran, and this is the Shawshank Hero's Journey. Thank you for joining us. What we're going to do here for the next hour or so is look at the number one film over the last 16 years on IMDB. And we're also going to explore the actual location. And that's a place that we went recently for the 30th anniversary. And so we're going to talk about those elements. We have some people in the room that have participated in the class that we're going to talk about, which is related to the Shawshank Redemption. It is called, in fact, the Shawshank Hero's Journey. So, what our idea is to hopefully expand the love affair that people have with this film to say there's more in it than you think, and you might want to do some exploring. My name is Robert Cochran. I recently earned my PhD studying the effect of improvisation and storytelling on Parkinson's disease. And that's where this program began. It's something called the Parkinson's Prison and the Hero's Journey to Escape. It is now, because of the universal effects of the film and the class, open up to you, the general public. So if you think, oh gosh, I've always wanted to explore this film further, or I can't stop watching it, I don't know why, this is the class for you. So let's take a look together. And by all means, my panel here, they are going to ask questions or bring comments along the way. And feel free to just raise your hand, everybody, if you see something that you like. And that this is a really, I think, an important part right away is to say all are welcome. Because I do think when we talk about this image of Andy reaching for the sky and feeling the result of the redemption that we get from the film, this is once again a universal feeling we're all after. It is as human as it gets and as celebratory as it gets. So again, to everybody watching, all are welcome to explore further and hopefully take this class and this journey with us. So when we talk about the hero's journey, first of all, we talk about the film. Why is Shawshank the number one rated film on IMDb since 2008? Anybody in the panel? Why do you think, or why for you, just in a word or two, why is Shawshank the number one rated film on IMDb since 2008? Go ahead, BJ.
Well, you can really feel the characters' journeys as they go through from beginning to end, and each character is very well developed, and you see them at both extremes of being in charge and then being vulnerable. So no matter who you can cling to in this movie, you follow their path the whole way through.
Beautiful. I love that. Karen.
The actors of the time, the top actors of the time from when it came out, and even though it didn't do well in the box office at the beginning, it grew as the actors' careers grew.
Yeah, very much so. Susan?
This is a story that starts with finding out that Andy didn't do it, but he's going into the prison, and it's an extraordinary story of courage and resilience under dire conditions, which I guess you guys saw up close. That was a big piece of it for me.
We're going to take a look at some of those dire conditions. You're exactly right. They existed in reality, and then they went ahead and did some movie magic to present them in that way. Tom, for you, in a word or two, or maybe a sentence, why do you think Shawshank might be the number one rated film?
I saw the movie when it came out, and as you had pointed out, it didn't get very good reviews. And I went to see it, and I thought, that's really a good movie. I wonder why they didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then for the next several years, every time I saw it on television or it was made available, I would sit and watch it, and I just got trapped into it. I loved this story. It wasn't until I started taking lessons in what is involved and delving deeper into the story, only then did I find out the reality of it and how important a movie it is as far as those of us trying to live a complete life. There's a lot there for us.
And you bring up an important point, right? That this is what we're going to talk about in the term cinema therapy, which is a recognized field of psychology that, says films aren't just there to entertain us. They are, in fact, there if we wish to use them to better our lives. And we're going to talk about that process. Amy, you have a background in film, and you know a little behind the scenes stuff, having worked in that industry. What is your feeling about why people flock to this film the way they do?
Um, the casting is fantastic. It's spot on. The screenwriting is rich, and it obviously, as we've been saying, it really delves into emotions, but I'm saying the way it was written. I'm saying the vocabulary of it. It was just very, very good. And there's a lot to be said for films that don't have a lot of bells and whistles of effects, but just enough. And yeah, and I think Andy, an actor who plays Andy, was just really crucial that we got sucked into him in the beginning of the film.
You've heard cast several times from you guys, and that's great. We will talk a little more when we met some of the cast members, and of course the director who was there too, talking about that exact thing, that this is an incredibly intimate and human story, and so it was either going to work or not work based on that. And then, as you also brought up the script, many people consider this the best script of all time, and that was to an actor, and certainly to the exec producer and other crew members. What they all said, they said just absolutely, this was the best script they'd ever written or read. And as we'll talk about, that has roots too. So here are some other things that people brought forward. They said hope, just in a word, hope. That is, of course, one of the central themes of the film. And you know, it's such a delicate emotion, the way that it's handled in this film, and given the weight and breadth that it is, and the meaning that it does, really sunk with a lot of people. Resilience, we heard that a number of times. That is a human condition, right? We're all going to get knocked down. There are things bigger than all of us in this world. And, you know, there are unfair treatments that happen to all of us in this world. What it comes down to, the people we admire, the people that are heroes, are the ones that demonstrate resilience, that get up one more time than they're knocked down. Friendship. It's one of the all-time great friendship films. Andy and Red, you could, I think, without problem, call it a love story between these two men, because the relationship that they foster over 19 years together is deeper than either of them would have imagined, of course, and more than we would expect from a prison film. There are a number of fantastic prison films that show relationships in a lot of ways. This one is one of the few, I think, that shows both the dire and the terrifying effects of prison, and yet keeps its humanity. That is the mix that I think of a film like Escape from Alcatraz, which I just love, the Clint Eastwood film, but that is a very different tone of a film. You know, the hero, Clint Eastwood's character there, doesn't have the redemptive characters of Andy. He similarly escapes, and there are some similar types of characters and archetypes, but that character is extraordinarily different. And to find this level of kindness, of intelligence, of hopefulness in this space is what is really stark. A lot of art is about, like we see in this picture, what they call chiaroscuro, light, dark. And when we can throw things in great juxtaposition next to each other, it's stunning to watch it happen. Also, courage, flat out, that the stakes, again, in a story don't matter if they're not high enough. If we don't feel life and death, and we don't see the impossible happen in front of us, we're not going to be swept away. Andy escaping was an impossible thing in so many ways. And the fact that he did not only thrills us, it just leaves us in awe of the man's courage, because it could have gone wrong so many times in so many ways. And he continued anyway. And then this one, sticking to the institution. I think all of us have had relationships, either with individuals or organizations, where we have felt powerless, where we have felt under the thumb thereof. And to watch someone beat the institution and do it in an unbelievably gratifying way, to not only get his release, but to get the comeuppance for those that were holding the thumb down on him in incredible ways, is very, very satisfying. So all of this leads us into the Shawshank hero's journey. And that is, of course, the story that the way we use it in this process. So let's talk about cinema therapy for a moment, and let's watch this trailer, which demonstrates for about a minute what we're doing. 30 years ago, one of the most beloved films in cinema history was released.
I understand you're a man that knows how to get things.
I'm known to locate certain things from time to time.
What if you could go on a hero's journey with Andy and Red and find the story from your life you've been waiting to tell?
I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
Join us for the Shawshank Hero's Journey, an online writing course where hope is still the best of things. The Shawshank Hero's Journey, presented by Yes and Exercise, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Well, this is who we are. This is Yes and Exercise, and again, as indicated, a 501c3 nonprofit serving the Parkinson's community. Because we've run this program now for over 2 years, and in extension where it began in my PhD for 4 years, we now are ready to open this up to the public. It is part of a larger field of opportunity to look at all movies differently. Cinema has a unique way of presenting our lives and telling us the truth, of telling us both what we're afraid of and what we hope to see, and somehow projecting ourselves onto it. That part of the communication, however, is not as well understood or prescribed at this moment. The idea of the film being projected and then therefore being projected onto the screen and then onto us, that part we get. We pay our money, we are entertained or moved. The part where we get to talk back to the film, in essence, or talk with others who are exploring the film, that's the unique thing we're doing here. That's what cinema therapy is, and we do it in a group fashion. We meet for once a week over the course of 16 weeks. We write 1 page per week about our experience in the hero's journey, which we'll go over, Joseph Campbell's work, the map that shows what we're talking about. And from that, from both writing our own pieces and reading what other people are writing as they go through the cinematic experience together, we discover pieces of ourselves we never knew. We understand ourselves in ways we never did. We begin to know, oh, that's why I can't stop watching this film. It's got a piece of me that I didn't even realize. And the idea is from there that maybe you can do something with that. Maybe you could write your own story or make your own film or song or paint a picture or in some fashion take control or have influence over your life in a way you didn't previously. Everyone in here is a graduate of the Day One program. And I wonder if any of you have which is cinema therapy, I call it Day One for short. Would anybody like to say maybe just a word or two, a quick line about the experience for you and why you think it's universal, not just for Parkinson's, but humanly universal? BJ.
So I think that everyone has something they're dealing with. I mean, this started out as a course for Parkinson's people and how we escape our Parkinson's prison. But, you know, everyone has something that they're dealing with in life and maybe be stuck on it or can't move beyond it. And they need the key to move forward. So using the hero's journey, it is a way of making that happen.
Wonderful, BJ. Thank you very much. Anybody else a thought on why perhaps this story moves beyond Parkinson's and this therapy? Karen?
Yes, and what Ben just said, but it takes it a step farther, you know, with the hero's journey with it, you know, you can only get so far on your own, but between the group and the movie and the book, it pushes you past. You might have got, you know, well, I want to do this in my life, but you just couldn't get the rest of the way. And having the hero's journey take you full circle, you're going to change your life by the time you're done in one way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Anybody else have thought either on your experience or again, why it works universally? Tom?
One of the issues of Parkinson's is that it's obviously a serious disease. In most cases, it's not a fatal disease. And that leaves you with a lot of emotions that are hard to understand, which range from why me to I'm not going to sit and feel sorry for myself. It could be so much worse. So you don't know where you lie on the spectrum. And I think this helps you define how Parkinson's affects you, as well as other problems in life. and how you deal with them and keep them in perspective.
And Tom, let me ask you, you as a person with Parkinson's, does that mean that you are Parkinson's? Does Parkinson's define you?
Doesn't define me at all.
I
And
love
that's
that.
why that's why you have to find what is the alternative to that? Because if it doesn't define you, what's the role it plays in your life if you want to deal with things realistically and effectively?
Which is why we call it the Parkinson's prison, the mindset that some get
Yeah,
into. And that's not just Parkinson's, it's any, difficult situation that
right.
limits us or labels us, right?
It really helps you understand your situation and how you're going to feel about it and deal with it.
Fantastic. Good. Anybody? Susan, yes.
The way the course is structured brings in stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have in my life. It will bring in a song. We'll bring in an improv game that will help us focus on or understand or have access to some wisdom or some piece of the story from the movie. And having that structure and having the other people in the class and then having little film clips and little games, that's what makes it different.
Excellent. Excellent. So again, I'm hearing the multi-layer and all the approaches. And Amy, yes, please.
I think so. When I found Yes and organization, I was looking for group therapy online, and that is what I still call it, more or less, to people when I'm trying to explain it. I think that these films that we've done are incredible tools, can meet the person, whether Parkinson's or not, on a level of where they need to explore themselves. I mean, personally, I've done 2 of them. I did Shawshank, and then I did
Inside Out.
Inside Out. Thank you. And I'm not sure if I had switched which one if I did Inside Out first, if I would have had the same outcome.
Right.
Because this film really forced me into places that it forced me to do things I don't think I would have done even with Inside Out. It's probably because of the film itself. It's not the type of film that I would just flock to go see,
Right,
because it's hard to watch.
I'm glad you bring that up. Shawshank is a very intense film, and as we'll talk about when we talk about what the cast and crew response to it as to why the film works the way it does, and they're explorers as much as the rest of us. It is important to acknowledge the darkness and the pain and the difficulty. And back to the chiaroscuro thing, right? It is the depths it goes to that allows the lights to sing the way they do. So thank you very much for that. Let's go ahead and roll forward here to talking about the location itself. It's in Mansfield, Ohio, first of all, which is about halfway between Cleveland and Columbus in Ohio. And it's a small town that, you'd skip by if you didn't have reason to go otherwise, probably. However, once you go inside, the charm of it that has been built up, I think, largely because of the tourism business, and to just scream the headline here, by the way, they've done $200 million worth of tourism business since 1994 when the film was released, based on Shawshank and the Ohio State Reformatory, which is the prison they shot in. So let's take a look at some of the things that make up this place. Well, there it is, my first look at it. And the feeling that you can't quite capture here, there isn't a good vista to get, but when you round the corner and see it, because of that opening shot where they have the flyover of the prison, I've only had that for a couple of things in my life. One was the first time I saw Wrigley Field when I turned the corner, and oh my God, there it was in the middle of Chicago. And then the other was when I was in a cornfield in Dyersville, Iowa, and turned in, oh my God, there's the field of dreams. Those are the only times I've had that experience, that, oh my God, sweep me away from turning the corner. And this certainly has that feeling. And they're getting set up. This is before the event. So they even had a fence you couldn't break into the prison unless you had access. So I had to stand outside early on. And as we go forward, when we did get to take a look inside, you get to see some of the majesty of it. And you see it from the outside. That's one look at it. Thing to know is on the inside, it is torn apart. And it was torn apart back in the early 90s when they were looking at it, because it was looking to be demolished at that time. They built another state reformatory right next to it. But the outside of it is historical and in a certain way beautiful in terms of its size and its scope and what it has. They had all sorts of things around, and you could interact with the cutouts, including, as BJ is here, offering some chess advice or checkers advice to Red and Andy as they play. And they really, this was specific for the anniversary, which I think they've done every 5 years since the 10-year anniversary. They have these sorts of things, but that isn't to say that they don't have a lot of special things anytime you would go. I highly recommend going to visit. Here we were visiting the bus, waiting to get on with Red to head to Zihuatanejo. They had all sorts of these elements all around that you could interact with, and it was pretty amazing to see these things that mean so much on the screen come to life in this way. And then as you head downtown, this is where they have the Destination Mansfield offices, and the Shawshank signs are everywhere. And along with the Shawshank signs are the Shawshank people. Again, those cutouts are all over town. You'll find Andy, you'll find Red, you'll even find Boggs, and you'll find Captain Hadley and the Warden. They're all around. And then my favorite, perhaps, is Andy. And as you see the shirt there, Andy taught me good and well, having to do specifically with Andy's journey, but I think also broadly with all of our journey with this film, that Andy teaches us, not in the same way perhaps as we saw Tommy get taught about grammar, but instead about life. Instead about how to handle difficult situations. And so the idea that Andy taught me good and well is the literal play off of the Tommy's, sadness and fear of approaching him. I don't learn so good. Well, you don't learn so well. We'll work on that. That's the idea. And that all of us could learn good and well in our own lives is something that Andy can offer us. This is part of what they call what's the name of it again, BJ? I was going to call it the Foodway. The Foodway, that's right. And the market outside, and they still have the homage to Red, who both he and Brooks had that job when they lived in the halfway house outside of the prison. So once you leave the town, there's more to see. In fact, the roads, there's where Red went down the road to find the wall in Buxton to see what Andy had left for him. To get on that road and see and feel, it looks just like it did in the movie. There it is, sitting there waiting for you. And there's the cabin, the opening scene where Andy found, his wife and her lover, and was deciding whether or not to be the one to kill them. And as we know, he didn't. But to be there in that space and to be lurking, again, you get to hold the film in a different way. You get to feel differently about it. And then we got to also meet the cast and crew along the way. And one thing we got to hear was Stephen King's origin story. He wasn't there, but he sent a video, and he told us the beginning for him was that it started like many stories do, as an image in his mind. He had a poster. It wasn't of Rita Hayworth, but a photo or a picture on the wall of a prison cell. And there was an innocent man behind that, hiding, digging a hole to freedom. And that was the image that brought him into the story. And as it does so often for him and his gifted imagination, it came out to him as he marks two stories that he really feels he got it right. He feels that, and The Green Mile is the other one. I don't know if it's just because they're prison films, but these are stories on page that he feels he got right the way he intended. And we are the beneficiaries of that. When we went to go meet the cast and crew on the first night, they once again had the cutouts. And here's Frank Darabont, the director and screenwriter of the project. And once again, BJ has a lot to say, and we appreciate that, because one of our goals is to get to Frank. And also, there were a lot of fans with some wonderful shirts. We can see they had Andy and Red campaigning for president and vice president, which was a lot of fun. And then we found this Uber fan who had actually found the exact Bible they used in the movie and cut out a rock hammer for his own version. Just a spectacular piece, and there's a lot of this going on, and really fun to be around just hundreds and hundreds of fans of the movie as we went inside the theater. And there is the historic Renaissance Theater, a beautiful theater in downtown Mansfield, probably capacity of about 400 seats. And sure enough, out come the cast and crew, and there they are. And we're seeing, we don't see of course, Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. But heading over from the side here, we've got Ben Mankiewicz from Turner Classic Movies. There's Frank Darabont. There is Dan Lester, the exec producer. There is Bob Gunton, who played the warden. William Sadler played Haywood. There's Gil Bellows, who played Tommy. And there is Mark Rolston, who played Boggs. The management, production management, and location management was done by this gentleman, and I'm sorry I'm not catching his name off the top of my tongue. Fantastic gentleman who told the story of why they chose that prison and all the things they had to do to create, because they couldn't shoot directly in the prison. They had to create the prison cells themselves. There were certain areas of the prison they could shoot, but they were so dilapidated they couldn't. Morgan Freeman's son was there. Alfonso played the role of the prisoner saying fresh fish, and also was the photo double for Morgan in his rejection photo that he got from time to time. This gentleman, Scott, was the golf pro, and he had a lot of fun with his small role and putting that forward, because he said the whole role was kissing. And that was basically the gig. And then we got a gentleman over here who played the role, and I'm forgetting his name, but he was the prisoner who let them know that the prisoner who cried on the first night was killed. He was the one who worked in the ward to let them know. This woman right here was one of only 2 speaking roles for women in the film, and she was the woman who chided the manager of the foodway for them not double bagging the groceries, and she really let him have it. And then this gentleman at the end was indeed the manager who told Red, "You don't have to ask me every time you have to take a piss." So the nice score across the board here is you see some of the, of course, the reason the film is there because of Frank Darabont, all the way down to some locals who were local hires and local casts who got to play small roles. And they're all talking about how this film affected them all these years later. And they told wonderful stories about that and brought forward, some of the magic that they feel it was about. As we talked about earlier, they really highlighted the fact that Frank's script was the best thing they'd ever read. And they said the casting, and in particular, took a moment to call out Gil Bellows. One of the stories that, is somewhat underground, although it's getting more well-known, is that Brad Pitt was initially supposed to play the role of Tommy. And this was right after Thelma and Louise, and that exploded him into the stratosphere, and he was no longer available. But they all to a person said it would have been different if Brad had played it. And in fact, that Tim Robbins wasn't supposed to play Andy. Tom Cruise was supposed to play Andy. Rob Reiner, who had directed Stand By Me and Misery, the 2 Stephen King films that made Castle Rock, the production company, had a bit of the Stephen King magic touch. And they, in fact, went to Frank, who was an unknown director, and he had the screenplay, and said, "Can we buy this script off you so that we can develop it for Tom?" Because they had just done A Few Good Men. And Frank, this relatively unknown, said, "I'm going to stick to my guns, and I'm going to say I want to do this. This is mine." And he did. And by the way, the backstory for Frank is that, again, as somebody who loved films and worked in them from a production standpoint, he had contacted Stephen King years ago for a short film called A Woman in the Room. And this was from Stephen King's collection Skeleton Crew. And he asked, "Is there any way I could adapt this?" And Stephen King at that time in the early 80s had a very unknown policy of allowing young filmmakers to go ahead and make a non-commercial version of his short stories for $1, that he would option the non-commercial rights for $1. And he called them Dollar Babies. And Frank was one of the first to do that. And in his book, the screenplay of The Shawshank Redemption, Stephen King and Frank Darabont told the story of how they met and how Frank went ahead and got the rights to the screenplay, first for A Woman in the Room, made an incredible version of it that Stephen King was just lauding to this day as a beautiful short, which you can find on YouTube if you want to look up. It's there. It was released in a limited VHS collection along with, I believe, The Boogeyman, in a mid-'80s, classic, as it were. And then, Frank and Steve had developed a little bit of a relationship. And Frank said, would it be possible that I could get the rights to Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption? And Steve said, well, sure, but they'll never let you make it. And Frank went ahead and said thanks and got the option. It took him several years to write it, but when he did, he sent it to Steve, and Steve said, Frank, we got a problem. This is too true to my words. This is what this honors what I wrote. They will never let you make this. And of course, the rest is history. So, the stories of near misses and the way it comes together and the humanity behind the film was fantastic. BJ, is there anything you want to add from what you heard or saw in this get together?
Well, one of the things, the production supervisor, Kokai Ampa,
Thank you.
name. And he told the story of finding this is a Rust Belt town, so a lot of the industry had moved away, and they actually found a huge warehouse that they were able to build the cells that you saw whenever they first come in, and they have the scene of the 3 tiers. That's all built, and that's not the actual prison itself. And that he ran a short film on the building of that, and it really opened your eyes on how much was filmed on actual location, how much was on set, but the actual set was still in Mansfield. So that was really cool. The stories that you heard, even from the smaller actors, the lady on the end was the teller in the bank. And she said, I only have 18 words, but that's more than any other lady in the movie. So I consider myself the leading lady of Shawshank Redemption. So I thought that was really cool. But when they were talking about casting, you really heard the stories about the decisions and how the right person was more important than the name recognition. And they did talk about how they chose people over, status. And if anyone else in any of the roles had been chosen differently, the magic wouldn't have happened.
I agree. And really quickly, because I did have these names written down, I want to pay proper respect to all the actors there. Scott Mann played Glenn Quinton, the golf pro. Mac Miles played Tyrell, who's the one who told us in the scene when Haywood was collecting the cigarettes that that fat ass was the name of the character had died. And now I don't know, I heard differently, and it may be because there were only 2 women character. We're 50-50 on this. I thought that was Dana Snyder, the Foodway customer. You think that was the bank teller's assistant, is what I understand. Those were the 2 women. It could have been either way. So it was one of those 2 women. I have Dana Snyder from the Foodway as one of the possibilities. And Robert Haley played the Foodway manager. So those are the people. And thank you so much for getting Kakai's name. I did get to meet and speak with Kakai later at a behind the scenes crew only meeting, and he was quite generous and in fact loved the nature of this project and said that he had made a couple films himself that had to do with mental health and would like to see them as cinema therapy. So who knows, we may have Kakai involved and do some of his films as these projects as well. So very nice to hear, as well as Dan Lester, David Lester, I call him Dan, David Lester, the exec producer, was also very supportive of this cinema therapy use of what we were doing, saying this was excellent work. So very happy to get the chance to meet them. Amy, yes.
Was Clancy Brown also there? I thought
he was. We'll get to that. He wasn't there on this stage, but there's more coming. So let's roll forward. And we did get a moment with Gil Bellows, and it was very nice to show him, of course, his shirt because it directly aligns with his character. And he was a very kind guy, and it was wonderful to get to see him and meet him up close rather briefly. As you can imagine, they were swarmed. There was an unexpected thing in the process, which is something they call the Shawshank Hustle, and it's a 7K race, which is something that I'd heard about it, but I thought I'm not going to have time for this. But once I saw it, that they were doing it, I said, I've got to do this thing because it was an experience. It was something to be part of. 7K is a little over 4 miles. There were over 2,500 racers. They've been doing this race for 10 years now, and it starts at the prison ground. You go through downtown and then back to the prison. And it was on Saturday morning. And in the middle of the race, they have this beautiful carousel. I'll show you a picture of. It's an old time carousel. And as part of your race ticket, you can get on the carousel 2 miles in. If you want to stop running and go ride the horses, you can. And I did. And it was awesome. And then, of course, the medal, which I'll show you in a moment. I've run a number of races, some half, even was a marathon, some of the Disney races, which are considered the best in the world. I have never found a cooler or more unique and awesome medal than the one I'm about to show you. So let's take a look at some of those pictures. There is race morning. It also gave me the opportunity to tour the prison on my own because everyone was out here getting ready for the race. And I said, well, I got an hour before this thing starts. And they said, help yourself. And I went into the prison pretty much by myself, which was scary and awesome. And then you get to see along the way, they have this beautiful Welcome to Mansfield set of silos together. And here is the carousel. It is majestic and beautiful and so well kept. And it has the incredible old music. It looks exactly what it feels exactly what it looks like. It's rather perfect for downtown. And there is one couple that was holding hands as they were riding the horses. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing, a pair of racers who were just enjoying their horse ride together. And then back there's the medal. And as you can see, it is the Holy Bible, a replica of it. It is extraordinarily heavy. I've got to say it's probably easily 6 pounds, solid metal. And that's the outside of it. So it's a lot to carry around your neck to begin with. But then you can crack this thing open, as it turns out, and look what's on the inside. How cool is that? Right? And it says, "Dear Warden, you were right. Salvation lay within," Andy Dufresne, which of course the Bible and the film did so as well. And it had a second page where you could open it up and it shows the book of Exodus with an imprint of the rock hammer. So this medal was truly one of the coolest things I've ever received. I even posted it on the Disney Run pages, Facebook, where they always tout all things amazing about the Disney races and everyone went, oh my gosh, I've got to do that race. I've got to get that. I mean, if that's what they do, and they do just kudos to the coordinators of this race. It was extraordinarily well run. And that medal just is something I will have happily for the rest of my life. It was more than worth the price of admission for sure. As we move forward, we see inside of the prison. I'm going to show you. This is a quick look to give you an overview of just some of the dilapidated nature. The paint is falling off everywhere. The concrete is falling off everywhere. It rises at least 5, if not 6 stories of cells on top of each other. It is the epitome of hell. When I saw the Hollywood Reporter article before I went, and it talked about, the writer said they've turned this tourist destination, they've made this hellhole into a tourist destination. At first I was like, oh, that's kind of a mean shot at Mansfield, but it's not. It's a shot at this prison, which is, by the way, they lean into that aspect. They want you to feel the fear of this prison, and it doesn't take much to feel it because it is all there and ready for you to see its dangerous and awful nature. I grew up going to Alcatraz here as a visitor, because that's something in the Bay Area you do. And this was more frightening than Alcatraz. And again, these cells, you see them, and if you are brave enough, you can walk into them. You could even go into the solitary confinement, which I don't have a photo of, but it looks and feels like you would guess. It's awful. They do also have positive and fun things in there. This was the set for where they shot the halfway house, and there, in fact, is Brooks, the cutout of him, and there is the magnificent Brooks and Red was here markings up on the ceiling. And so to feel that, to be part of that epic part of the film, once again, just brings, I think, even the fan who has seen this film so many times, you're going to feel a new level when you go to visit and walk these steps and feel the things that the actors and the crew felt as they created this film. So I can't recommend it highly enough. You also might run into somebody. Hey, that's William Sadler. And he was nice enough, who played Haywood, to stop and take a picture for us. And there, BJ, BJ, say hi so your picture gets highlighted.
Hello. I got an autograph from him as he was walking by.
Very nice of William Sadler. They get absolutely, as you can imagine, mobbed. So we happened to catch him as he was rounding the corner. No one seemed to recognize him. We quickly got a picture, and the mob started to come, and then they rushed him away. So we got lucky, and he was very gracious and kind about that. Now, you mentioned, hey, how about Clancy? Well, here he is. So the second night, we got to see a more intimate version of just the cast right here. And this was inside the prison. They set this up. Once again, Ben Mankiewicz was the fantastic host from Turner Movies Classic and Turner Classic Movies. And the cast here, they repeated some stories, but they went deeper. The heartfelt nature of, I think, the love they all feel for each other, the gratitude they feel for Frank for being part of something that is much bigger than all of them. And they really talked about, too, I think, the difficulties on the film that, learning Frank as a first-time director on something this scope and scale, learning how to deal with Morgan and Tim, he said, was they're completely opposite in terms of acting style. Tim Robbins is method. Morgan Freeman is improvisational in the moment. He's right there. And those two acting styles required a different type of touch and feel from Frank. He, as a heady person himself, could go to Tim and sit and talk with him and really get into the nuts and bolts. And Tim wanted all of it. Morgan, on the other hand, started rolling his eyes when Frank would talk to him. And Frank said, "You don't really need this." He said, "No." So he also talked about having to walk a delicate line of how to talk to actors too, because you're on the set and sometimes you're pressured by time. You need things to go a certain way. Part of Tim Robbins' process was to explore the lines, to go off script sometimes and to say things differently. Morgan said the same thing the same way every single take. He was a machine. And at one point that Frank had to go up and talk to Andy about this, and he had to learn carefully how to do it, because while he was going for take after take, eventually Morgan said, Frank said, "Let's get one more," and Morgan said, "No, you don't need that." And he was like, "Oh," and he said, "Does that mean you're refusing to do another take?" And Morgan said, "I guess I am." And then Frank said, "Okay, moving on." And that was a point of give and take, right? You're a director, not a dictator. And you have to learn to communicate with all sorts of different people in all sorts of different ways. And it was really fascinating to hear the inside takes and all that. BJ, was there anything you heard in particular from the cast that caught you?
Yeah, it's almost what I found most interesting is that the actors are almost all opposite their characters. Whereas, Tommy comes in, he's kind of like this 50s guy with his sleeves rolled up, and he's got a chip on his shoulder. But when he was talking about his role, he's very soft spoken and everything else. And then Tom Clancy, he's Hadley, he's mean, he's everything else. But you get the impression that he's the goofball and prankster, and he's just kind of chuckling the whole time as everyone else is talking. And then Bob Gunton said this is really the first time that he was in front of the camera and not a background player. And Boggs was very straightforward. I don't know if I could live having done a role like Boggs in a movie and living with that as what people see of your skills. But everyone was very open. Haywood talked about how he had that stutter come out and then he adopted it for his character. And the trust that a first-time director built with each one of these people was amazing. And you really felt like they could go off and shoot a movie together today and not have skipped the beat from 30 years ago.
Yeah. And, to a person, each of the actors said that it was one of the easier acting jobs they had because all they had to do was say the words that were there. Now, Tim obviously did a little different style. He was more exploratory, but everyone else here said, if I said the words and it made me look and feel great, and obviously that goes back to the set design, to the wardrobe, to the cinematography, of course, to the support of the sound design and the music. So there were many things they didn't know. None of them know. And as Frank is the first to admit, the film is really made in the editing bay. You shoot it, you hope you've got it, and now you have to figure it out. Because even what was in this amazing script, a number of things got cut because he was sure they were important, but they ended up saying, no, we don't need that. Or things were not filmed because in the moment they ran out of time and didn't have budget and they had to find a creative way around them. And ultimately look back and go, yeah, what we did was better. So there's this amazing mix of an incredibly solid script and then also the heart and spirit of a team to figure out what needs to be figured out when the situations arise. And they all did an amazing job. And I can outwardly state that one of our goals was to get to Frank Darabont, because personally, he's a hero of mine, and I followed his footsteps to get a dollar baby of my own for a film called Lucky Quarter. And I have met Stephen King in person and shared one of the films I made with him. And Steve has been very kind to me and supportive. And Frank and I were very close to meeting, but didn't quite happen. And at one time, we actually were, I wouldn't say competing, but we had our eyes on the same project, another Stephen King project called The Long Walk, which I understand is in production now and perhaps will be out next summer for fans of the Stephen King world. It's being shot up in Canada right now. We'll see. It's been one of the hottest, most turned around scripts over the last 20 years. Frank got the rights to it after I had requested the rights to it from Steve, and there really wasn't much to debate there. Frank, at that point, had done Shawshank and Green Mile, and I understand why Steve said, yeah, I'm going to give this to Frank. So the hope at the time was to meet with Frank and say, hey, if I can be part of the development of this. As it turned out, life went differently for me. Parkinson's for my dad and other things that forced me in a different direction out of that Hollywood phase. And for Frank, he found The Walking Dead and started moving in a different direction himself. So what I had done at the end of this meeting was to write a letter, and was hoping to get it to Frank. There was no access to the front of the stage, and he was whisked off and on, without opportunity. But Ben hung out for just a moment. And at the encouragement of Kelly, BJ's wife, go, Robert, go. I went over and was able to approach Ben and gave him the letter. And Ben was kind enough to say, sure, I'll get that to Frank. So as this film has to do with hope, I hope he did. I hope that Frank will read that. I hope that Frank and I will have an opportunity to talk about our connections and about maybe what we're doing with the film now, because that's what I want him to know, is that Shawshank Redemption, for as much entertainment value as it has, for as much value as it has for the town of Mansfield, for as much value as it has for all the cast and crew that have made careers off of this, it is now, as a film, unlocking people's lives. And that's what I want Frank to know. And I hope, again, we can talk further about that, because there is something called the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation. And they back creative projects, and it would be amazing if they wanted to get behind this so that we could offer it to more people who don't have tuition opportunity. So that is my hope, and that is a fantastic crew that gave an awful lot to us on this night. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the highlights here inside the prison. By the way, if you need a way out, that's the way out. They mark it clearly. Okay, the pipe. It's fantastic to see that thing up close and to get to see where Andy was, and you can get right next to it. There are all sorts of things like this that just elevate the experience of, I saw this, I felt this, now I'm part of it, and it is part of me. And that is the magic of going to the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, which I highly recommend. There are unexpected stories too, like this one. And the background actors on the final day had a presentation. And, these are people who had no lines, but were part of a summer of filming there. They were locals, and, they didn't know anything about, Hollywood filmmaking. And this dropped in their lap, and it was an incredible experience. And well, as they neared the end of production, there were two background players who noticed these stray dogs, and they were always in the prison yard. And, they carefully were able to approach them and started feeding them their lunch, these two stray dogs. They were worried because of the underbite of this one right there, that the dog might be mean. In fact, it wasn't mean. It just had an underbite. And they befriended these dogs. And on the last day of production, they were thinking about trying to see if they could round them up and maybe adopt them. The dogs weren't there, and they were heartbroken, and they went, oh no, something happened to them. They got captured, they got whatever. Well, Frank Darabont calls the background actor forward, and as a background actor to get called by the director, you're probably thinking, I'm going to get fired or sued. And he comes forward, and Frank says, we noticed you with these dogs, and we in fact took them to the vet and to get cleaned up. And we named one Hayworth, and we named one Rita. And Hayworth was adopted by one of the crew members, and this one, Rita, that you see right here, is what we'd like you to have as a thank you. And so they gave Rita the Shawshank Dog to this background actor who wasn't allowed to have dogs in his apartment, but made a way to make it happen. And his best buddy here, Brad Mavis, who wrote the story and illustrated these beautiful illustrations, is selling this book. And I just want to highlight that for anybody who'd like to find it. Go to Amazon and look up Rita the Shawshank Dog, and you'll find it. It's a beautiful piece, written in kind of children's story format and excellent illustrations and so heartfelt, so beautiful, and a piece to share. And that just shows you there's more going on to a film than we know just on the surface. So let's get back to telling the story as we come close to wrapping this right here. I mentioned the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell's work early on. This is a version of the hero's journey that is demonstrated by Chris Vogler. It's Joseph Campbell's work, but Chris Vogler is the Hollywood one-time script reader who found patterns that sounded similar enough to him to where he thought he could apply method to them, and that was Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So for Andy, this is his hero's journey. The ordinary world is the moment before going to court, and then the call to adventure is being convicted, and then the refusal of the call is seeing fat ass get crying out, "This isn't my place," and he gets killed. He meets Red. He crosses the threshold into saying, "Okay, I'm actually going to embrace being in prison and ask for something and open my mouth and try to figure out how to live here well." He decides in his tests, allies, and enemies to tell Captain Hadley, "Do you trust your wife?" Ask him. And that famous scene that changed his role as a prisoner into somebody who was providing value. And then in the inmost cave, Tommy told him about Elmo Blatch and that actually Andy wasn't guilty of the crime for real. He was truly innocent, unlike what everyone else said. And this set Andy off to go ahead and go into the warden's office where he faced the ordeal, which was solitary confinement, and it forced the warden's hand to kill Tommy. Andy then knowing, well, I can't live here anymore because this place doesn't let me be me and I can't be under that sword, has a moment of clarity, and the reward is to find out, I'm leaving. I'm going to get busy living or get busy dying in the cryptic way. And as he goes forward on the road back, we see Red dealing with the fact that his friend has disappeared. We don't know that Andy's escaped yet. We just know that he's disappeared. The resurrection is seeing Andy's escape, seeing him standing underneath the rain. And the return with Elixir is indeed when Red himself escapes, and instead of taking Brooks's route to commit suicide, that he can't live in an uninstitutionalized world, to follow the path of hope, the Zihuatanejo. And that's the hero's journey broken down. Those are the steps and stages we look at to say, if that formula works for a story like this, how would it make you explore your own story? What might you find if you saw this broken down along the way? What's in it for you? Well, we talked about Muhammad Ali being one of the most famous people with Parkinson's, and he said, "I feel like a prisoner in my own body." And of course, with Parkinson's, that's something, that you can see physically, but it also speaks to the mental state that a lot of us feel, especially with isolation, especially with loneliness, which are purely and absolutely provably epidemics in our country. So how can we break out? Well, again, I think Andy can teach us good and well how to do that. I mentioned the PhD study, and there's more information on that on the website, which is yesandexercise.org. And as you heard from Amy earlier, it's not just the Shawshank Prison or the Shawshank Redemption, but we now have 8 films in our stable. So if Shawshank isn't your cup of tea, or if it's only one of your favorites, take a look at some of the others and maybe even suggest one. If you don't see your favorite up there, I might be able to make a course out of that too. So the universal appeal is that the fact that we're all heroes of our own story, and we have the ability to learn and become stronger by taking advantage of that knowledge and rewriting. We can, instead of forgiving and forgetting, we can forgive and rewrite and become who we're supposed to become. So if you're feeling like a fresh fish and you want to join us for the next class, starting up here on September 2nd, it is a 16-week opportunity. And there is a tuition, which you can check out there. And if tuition sounds scary, don't worry about it, because there are fundraising opportunities. There are also disability arts grants for those who would qualify. And we're going to find a way. If you want to take this course, just say yes, and we'll figure out a way to have you take this course. Okay. And feel free to share it with anybody and everybody in your life who is a Shawshank fan. Again, this is not just for the people with Parkinson's or their community members. It is for everyone because of the universal appeal of the #1 film since 2008 on IMDb. Okay. Last thing, just some resources to know. If you want to see that film, The Woman in the Room, you can look it up on YouTube. There it is. There's Frank's film adapted from Stephen King's short. It is from the book Different Seasons, in case you want to read the original book, which is Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. That's Stephen King's story. And then the Shawshank Redemption shooting script, I mentioned that. And again, I highly recommend, you can probably find that in your library or you could buy it on Amazon. It has the script itself. It also has storyboards. It has behind the scenes stories of why scenes were used or not. And it has the foreword, of course, from Frank Darabont and Stephen King, all of which are very valuable. Lastly, The Writer's Journey. That is Chris Vogler's work, where he adapts Joseph Campbell's incredible writing. For those who've tried to read Joseph Campbell like me, you know it can be thick. You know it can be pretty heavy. Chris Vogler does a great job of breaking it down into more understandable and usable terms so that if this is interesting to you, I highly recommend that as well. All right, that is what we have. Oh, we'll not play the whole film. I think that would be a little much. It's there for you. But that's what we have for the Shawshank Hero's Journey. Any closing words from the panel here? I see BJ. Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Lee Tassif and the people of Mansfield. He's the president of Destination Mansfield. And the things they put together for people to come in and experience, you really feel the heritage of this movie. And one of the things they talked about is there's really no other movie except for, you say, Field of Dreams, where it has affected a town and really made a personality for it. And a Rust Belt town, they're losing all kinds of industry, but now all of a sudden they have people coming in for tourism. And so everyone, buys into it. Everyone's friendly. We had great food while we were there, and it was just a fun time. And to be able to walk the footsteps of the actors as they did through the different places, it made the movie even more magical.
Yeah, and I should mention that we did see the film reel to reel on the big screen that night after the first night seeing the cast and crew together. And because we had walked the steps, as BJ mentioned earlier that day, it was surreal to feel the film that close. I mean, it was I've watched it dozens, if not hundreds of times, but this was once again a new experience. So to all Shawshank fans, I can't, like BJ says, recommend highly enough traveling there. And thank you to Lee. Yes, BJ.
I just want to say 5 years from now, we all need to get together and go. It's going to be the 35th anniversary. They're going to have another shindig. So we all need to start planning now.
Crazy.
Just know that it's out there. Absolutely. Anybody else, anything you saw, felt, or noticed? I know you weren't at the anniversary. However, you are graduates of the Shawshank program and of day one cinema therapy. Yes, Karen.
You guys took amazing pictures in the architecture. I mean, some of those angles, you wouldn't know that it's a prison. I mean, the inside, of course, but some of the outside angles, it was just, you did a great job doing it play by play, so to share it with everybody. And I agree with Amy when what she said. Taking this version of the class first before you go into another one really does make it all come together nicely.
Sets a nice foundation. Thanks, Karen. Anybody else, anything before we head out? Yes, Tom.
I thought when I saw Shawshank, I was killing an afternoon. I didn't realize 20 years later it would affect my life this much.
Yeah. And that is the ongoing exploration. I don't think there's one answer, but why, again, that's an eternal, question to keep putting out there. Why does this film continue to grow and become what it is and affect us the way it does? I think it's just a great question to keep asking in a film to keep exploring. Amy?
Just thinking that this film also can show a person, maybe myself included, that they are in a prison of some type, self-imposed, illness, or whatever it is that's going on. When you watch it and you take this course to work your way through it, you know, you take it's like a magnifying glass on you turned on yourself. It's it opens it up.
I love that you see that in the film. And again, as someone who's worked on the other side of it too, you know that watching a film differently, studying it, breaking it down helps you see things that you'll have never seen before. And those are coming from you. The film stayed the same. It's what you've chosen to allow in. And that's a really beautiful thing. All right, Susan, yes.
Get busy living or get busy dying just is applicable for most of us, much of our lives. It's nice.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
A perfect close. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Please visit yesandexercise.org for more information, where you can also find my email if you want to get in contact, or sign up for the Shawshank Hero's Journey, which, again, will be starting on September 2nd. Please share. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. Bye-bye.